Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Wednesday, the 9th of October, comes to you from London. And we're seeing here the dollar index actually moved into bullish territory yesterday. A bit of a fall away just in the last hour here, but actually still bullish in all three time frames. And the trend is up with multiple upside targets. Still that 4% higher target for the dollar index in the short term. So we do still see dollar strength being the theme. The euro weakened yesterday, just now nudging resistance from the other side of the cloud, but bearish in all three time frames against the dollar and multiple downside targets, of course. And the Japanese yen, we're seeing the dollar climbing here. So the yen is actually holding up against the dollar as well. So we said yesterday that the dollar was likely to strengthen this week because of that transition through to bullish on the yen. Sterling is sitting at 122 against the dollar, so it's showing bearish in all three time frames there. And against the euro, we're seeing sterling actually lower yesterday as well on Brexit. No deal fears. Remembering this is my long-term picture, my Ichimoku chart, the cloud chart, long term, medium term, and short term. So I get a very quick view of the market every day. Looking now to the Swiss franc, we see that sterling is lower there as well. So the Swiss franc normally been quite a strong currency in times of uncertainty. Bitcoin is sitting at $8,100, so it's just teetering along this level. You can see here for the last couple of weeks, Bitcoin is really just sitting at that $8,000 mark. So we're still bearish on the medium and long-term charts. Last night in the US stock market, we saw the S&P 500 index falling away by 1.5%. So quite big falls there on trade concerns with China. Those concerns still opening up, and we're seeing here that the market is really at risk of turning down through the medium-term chart. We're bearish on the short term, not yet on the medium-term chart, and we're still holding on to the long-term bullish trend. The NASDAQ was also down by 1.5%, and so we're seeing here as well that the cloud is just falling away there too. And the Dow sitting at 1.2% lower, so that also is showing its hand. The Russell 2000 index, it's bearish on all three time frames. So this is the one, the broader index of 2000 US stocks, looking quite worrying. The US futures this morning, we're seeing up 0.4% on the S&P future and up 0.4% on the Nasdaq E-mini. Does suggest the market will open higher. Yesterday, it showed a similar reading, but then by the time the US market did get to the open, we were in bearish territory. So it's still potentially too early in the day to say, but it does look like we'll open slightly higher at the moment based on the futures. The UK market is up 0.2%, not enough to really change the picture here, bearish on all three time frames, and Midcaps in the UK up by a similar amount, but again, falling lower yesterday, making new multi-week lows there, taking out the low that we saw last week. So we're seeing levels now seen back at the end of August, and hitting long-term resistance there on the mid-caps in the UK. The DAX in Germany is up about 0.2% this morning as well, and we're seeing here also that we're bearish on all three time frames, and the CAC Quarante is down by less, but we are holding on to the bullish trend here. The CAC Quarante actually still looking reasonable, but bearish on that short-term chart. Tokyo was down 0.4% on the broader index, and the Hang Seng was down 0.6%. Hong Kong's troubles still weigh heavily on the markets. We're bearish on all three time frames there. The Shanghai Composite in China was actually up 0.4%, but again, charts all point to a bearish situation. India was up 1%, bucking the trend quite a bit there, but not enough to really get this market firing ahead. The long-term trend is still intact. We're seeing a long consolidation here. No real signs that this long-term trend is going to break, but the short-term and medium-term trends are less clear. Looking at the Aussie market, it was down 0.7%, so still bearish on the short-term chart, holding up to the medium and long-term charts. Brent Crude was sitting lower this morning, so we're just holding on to the short-term bullish trend, but it is really still bearish on all three on the medium and long-term time frames, as is WTI. So crude oil not looking strong at all, and US NatGas sitting the doldrums at around the 230 mark. Gold is back above $1,500 this morning. The uncertainty in markets helping the yellow metal, and we're seeing here we're just entering bullish territory on gold, so still looking pretty good. Holding on to the gains that we saw this year, looking very strong indeed on the medium and long-term charts. And silver also holding on to its gains, looking higher there as well. US 10-year yields sitting lower this morning. We're seeing here we're sitting at the 153 mark, so yield is just struggling to get into bullish territory there. And if we look at German bond prices, they are actually finding support at the moment on the cloud, but yields falling, bonds just recovering. Taking a look now at this data all coming from Thomson Reuters Icon or Metastock if you're using Metastock Zenith, the same system as Thomson Reuters but for private users. Looking now at the individual stocks, we saw the Dow. Pretty much everything was down yesterday. Only one stock bucking the trend, that was Walmart. Dow Inc. were down 2%. Cisco Systems down 2.9%. We're seeing a lot of stocks that were down 2%. So pretty grim day there for the market. Walmart, the only stock actually bucking the trend, that was up 0.3%. And in fact, the charts on Walmart still looking good, outperforming the Dow Jones Index by 10% this year, which for a steady stock like Walmart is quite a performance. Looking at the NASDAQ, the best performer yesterday, there are only 5 stocks up. American Airlines, Tesla again, they were up the day before as a leader, so they're bucking the trend a little bit. Charts still not fully recovering, and of course 30% underperformance so far this year. Monster Beverage was also up slightly, so there were one of the 5 stocks up in the NASDAQ, but the chart not looking great. Here on the medium and long-term charts, just falling away. Looking at the worst performer, Workaday, they were down 4.7%. The trend's still up here on the long-term chart, but falling away there. So that's quite key. Looking at the Aussie market now, we saw we were down 0.7% on the index. We had Cleanaway Mace Management, they were up 6%. They were bucking the trend, holding on to the long-term trend, but the medium term, we are seeing a fall away. They've gone from 30% outperformance back to 5% outperformance on the Dow this year. And if we look at the downside, we had Flight Sever, they were down 11%. So they've really been hit, and quite a big fall there through the cloud. That's taking them to bearish territory on the medium-term chart. We're looking like a recovery, but not really happening. Some of the bigger players there, we've got News Corp. They were down 4%. So seeing some quite big stocks in the Aussie market falling away, and AMP also just plugging new lows there, so not looking good there, down 40% versus the market this year. Taking a look at the Indian market now, the best performer, remembering that India bucked the trend yesterday, they were up, so nearly all stocks in the Nifty 50 were up this morning. So we got 5.5% on Bharati Infratel. They're holding on to their bull trend there, looking like a recovery through on the long-term trend. On the downside, we had Yes Bank, still one of the worst performing stocks in the Indian market, underperforming the Dow by 80% this year. So no signs of any recovery there. So that's quite key. Looking to Europe now, remembering this data is all coming to you from Thomson Reuters Icon. Here you see from Yahoo Finance, the free data source. And so here we see the prices coming in from Yahoo Finance. We've got GVC holdings in the FTSE, they're up 3.4%. EasyJet up 2.3%. They've benefited a little bit from the strikes of Ryanair and British Airways, and we are seeing a recovery in the relative, some 20% improvement in the relative performance versus the Dow Jones Index. Not enough to get it long-term bullish, but we are seeing new upside targets there for EasyJet on that medium-term chart. If we look at the downside now in the UK market, we see here we've got NMC Health, they're 1% lower. Hargreaves Lansdown, of course, the Woodford Patent Capital Trust really affecting them. They've turned bearish on the long term for the first time in years. Pearson's the fourth worst performer today, down 0.65%. They're nudging that new low that we saw there, and the long-term trend is clearly bearish. We've got downside potential of 11%, 10%, and 11%. So in fact, we've got a 27% downside target there. So Pearson's fell out of bed. Looks like that's going to continue there, so not a good-looking chart at all. Taking a look at the FTSE 250, we are looking now at Just Eat. they're up 3.45% this morning. That's quite a strong performance, but not enough to change the chart. Still looking pretty grim. And if we look at the downside, Bakkavor Group down 4.7%, Rank down 4.3%. Recovery in Rank actually looking like it's happening, but we're just hitting some resistance here. We have outperformed the market though by 22%, so Rank performance has been pretty good, and we've still got a 7% upside target there on the long-term chart. Taking a look now at the FTSE the Euro Stoxx 50. Top performer in Europe this morning in the 50 stocks is Schneider Electric, up 0.9%. Here we see the live pricing coming in. So they're still looking pretty good on the chart. BMW, they're up nearly 1% this morning. Not enough to really change the long-term trend here, and underperforming the Dow Jones by 10% so far this year. And if we look at the worst performers in Europe this morning, we've got L'Oreal. They're down 0.6%, but the chart's still looking pretty good. That long-term chart just holding on. Airbus down 0.3%, and we're seeing here again that long-term chart hanging on. So we are seeing a situation where the worst performers today tend to be the best-looking charts, and we see that quite often in a cyclical stage in the market. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.